You know, some moments on television hit so hard they feel less like scripted drama and more like real life heartbreak. And when Cody Brown on national TV looked Christine in the eye and said he wasn't attracted to her, that wasn't just a low blow. That was a breaking point. It wasn't the first time he said something cruel, and sadly, it wouldn't be the last. For fans who've been watching from the beginning, this wasn't just a family falling apart. This was the collapse of everything Sister Wives originally promised: equality, faith, and spiritual connection. Hi, friends. I'm Sophia, and welcome back to TLC's Sister Wives Reality. If you've been following this journey, or even if you're new and just catching up, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up if you've ever wanted the truth behind what really happened to the Browns. And I'd love to know what you think. Was this downfall always coming, or did favoritism destroy something that could have lasted? Today, we're going into the heart of season 19, where decades of spiritual marriage finally shattered. And not just because of the drama we've come to expect from reality TV. No. This time, the pain was deeper, more personal, because it wasn't just about love or jealousy anymore. It was about neglect. It was about emotional betrayal, and it was about a family that started out preaching balance, slowly becoming a cautionary tale of what happens when a man gives his heart to one woman and leaves three others emotionally stranded. We'll talk about the shocking ways Cody began to show preference to Robin, how the other wives, Meri, Janelle, and Christine, slowly became outsiders in their own family. And yes, we will talk about the tragic death of Garrison, the son whose passing didn't just leave a hole in their hearts, but exposed just how fractured the Brown family really is. This isn't just a recap. This is the emotional truth behind the crumbling of a plural marriage that once claimed to defy the odds. And it all started the moment love stopped being equal. From the very beginning, the Brown family built their identity around unity: one man, multiple wives, and a belief that love could be shared equally. But as time passed, it became harder and harder to ignore what viewers were starting to see: that Cody wasn't actually treating his wives the same. And honestly, he didn't seem to be trying all that hard to pretend he was. When Sister Wives first aired in 2010, Cody had three wives: Meri, Janelle, and Christine. Each woman had her own living space in their Utah home, and the family was presented as this functional, respectful, plural marriage. But the cracks were already forming. Then came Robin. Robin entered the picture in season 1, younger, soft-spoken, and carrying 3 children from a previous marriage. What started out as excitement for a new sister wife slowly shifted into something no one in the family could fully name, but they all felt it. The dynamic changed overnight. Robin wasn't just another wife. She became the wife, the one Cody wanted to be around, the one he doted on, the one whose feelings came first. And if that sounds harsh, just look at the facts. Cody legally divorced Meri, the woman who'd been by his side for over 20 years, just to marry Robin and adopt her kids. And yes, Meri agreed to it at the time. But what choice did she really have? When someone you love asks you to make that kind of sacrifice, you want to believe it's for the greater good. Except it wasn't. After the legal divorce, Meri's relationship with Cody completely crumbled. That emotional distance? It didn't happen overnight, but it was steady and brutal. Then came Christine, who revealed that Cody once told her, after they were married, that he was never attracted to her. Imagine living years with someone, building a life, raising kids, and then hearing that. On television, no less. And Janelle? She saw the writing on the wall too. In one of the most honest season 19 moments, she recalled Cody saying, "I met Robin, and she was everything I wanted." It was painful, not just to hear it, but to watch these women process it in real time. Cody wasn't just failing at balance. He was actively choosing one wife and pushing the others out emotionally. And as the years went by, his obsession with image, control, and Robin's comfort took priority over everything else. He liked the women to look a certain way. Christine talked about how Cody preferred his wives to always wear makeup. Meri admitted he used to take her shopping, like he was molding her into the version of a wife he wanted to display. Janelle, more independent by nature, eventually started to ignore those cues. But even she wasn't immune to the sting of knowing her appearance might have played a role in her place within the marriage. And through all of it, Robin stayed protected. She rarely got the same scrutiny. She wasn't asked to sacrifice anything. In fact, when Christine finally left the marriage, Cody said things that made everything even worse. He told Meri he was never in love with her. He told Janelle he stayed out of obligation. And he told the world on camera that Robin was his soulmate. That word, soulmate, might seem innocent in another context, but here, it was loaded. It was cruel. It erased decades of life, children, homes, and memories the other wives had built with him. By season 19, all 3 of Cody's original wives were gone. One by one, they walked away. Not because they stopped believing in plural marriage, but because they couldn't survive the kind of emotional rejection Cody kept handing them. And the saddest part is, he didn't seem all that sorry. But everything changed when tragedy hit the family in the most devastating way. Cody's son, Garrison, passed away. And suddenly, the chaos of spiritual imbalance was no longer just emotional. It was real, painful loss. A wake-up call. A chance to see whether the family could come together, or whether the damage was already too deep. Garrison's passing wasn't just a tragedy. It was the moment that forced this broken family to face each other again. For years, Cody had kept drifting further away from his older children, and Garrison, like many of his siblings, felt that distance sharply. There were moments on the show where you could actually see the hurt in his face, especially during the pandemic, when Cody's controversial rules kept him away from his kids while he stayed mostly with Robin. Fans didn't forget that. Garrison was outspoken about how he felt like an outsider, how his dad was always choosing Robin and her kids over the rest. And when he died, it wasn't just a personal heartbreak, it was a public reckoning. People were angry. They were devastated, and they were watching to see how Cody would respond. The funeral brought everyone back together. Meri, Janelle, Christine, they all came to say goodbye. Even Cody and Robin showed up. But instead of unity, the scenes we got were filled with tension, confusion, and grief that had nowhere to go. The family looked like strangers standing beside each other. People who once shared homes and holiday traditions now barely knew how to speak to one another. What shocked viewers the most wasn't just the sadness, it was Cody's behavior surrounding the funeral. Social media exploded when he casually mentioned Garrison's ashes were in the car. No ceremony, no sacred moment, just a sentence, like he was talking about groceries. Fans were furious. Many felt he was turning a moment of mourning into something about himself. And when he referred to Garrison as his special passenger, it felt performative, like he was trying to control the narrative rather than show any real vulnerability. Janelle, on the other hand, was the picture of quiet strength. She spoke softly but firmly about how much Wyoming meant to Garrison, about how her son had grown up working on their family ranch, and how it shaped who he became. She wanted him buried near her mother, close to the land and the legacy that mattered to him. Christine supported her, holding space for everyone's pain. Meri, too, showed grace. These women, who had been publicly hurt and humiliated, still found a way to show up, not just for Garrison, but for each other. While Cody and Robin hovered awkwardly, these ex-wives led the emotional heart of the goodbye. There was one moment that really struck me. When Cody picked up the shovel and began to dig the grave for his son's ashes, it should have been powerful, symbolic. But even that gesture felt strained. Not because he didn't care, deep down he probably did, but because his actions over the years had eroded the trust needed for those gestures to feel real. He hadn't just lost a son. He'd lost his family long before this. And now, at the one moment where unity could have offered healing, the silence between them said everything. You could see it in the way Janelle talked about grief. There was love there, but also distance, a kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream or cry, but just sits with you. And Christine? She smiled through tears, comforting her children, reminding them that their brother would be remembered with love. Not just in words, but in legacy. The funeral wasn't just about saying goodbye to Garrison. It was a mirror held up to everything that had gone wrong in the Brown family. Every moment of neglect, every painful confession, every time Cody made someone feel less than, it was all there, right under the surface. Fans who had watched the show since day one felt it too. In comment sections, on forums, even in private messages, I saw people mourning not just Garrison, but the version of the Brown family they used to believe in, the one that felt real, the one that, despite its unusual structure, was once full of love. But now, It's like Cody's actions, his favoritism, his neglect, his control had come full circle, and there was no escaping the consequences anymore. And the question on everyone's mind was the same. Can this family come back from this? Or has Cody burned too many bridges to ever find his way back? Because no matter how much makeup, image control, or camera time you give someone, grief doesn't lie. It shows you who people really are. After Garrison's funeral, it wasn't just the raw emotions of loss that lingered. It was the aftermath, the whispers, the realization that things could never go back to the way they were. If you've been following the Brown family for years, it was impossible not to notice the changes in how they interacted with one another after that tragedy. And these changes weren't subtle. No, they were loud, they were painful, and they were impossible to ignore. Cody's response, or lack thereof, spoke volumes. You could see it in his eyes, the avoidance, the inability to really be there for the people who needed him most. The wives who had given him their loyalty, their love, their lives, he had failed them in ways no words could fix. And now, in this public moment of grief, he was once again falling short. For the first time, we started to see the cracks in his image. The man who once prided himself on being a spiritual leader, a family man, was now being exposed for the very thing he had spent so much time trying to hide, his favoritism. Robin, 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 the woman who, by all accounts, was his favorite in the eyes of the public and his family. And it wasn't just that he loved her more, it was that he started making every decision through her lens, leaving the other wives feeling not just sidelined, but expendable. It was clear in the way Cody started talking. He was detached, almost distant from the grief. His words lacked depth. And his actions were even worse. It wasn't lost on fans when he mentioned in an interview that he had no romantic feelings left for Meri, Janelle, and Christine. How do you come back from that? How do you look the women you've spent years with in the eye after saying something so heartless? You can't. You really can't. And it wasn't just the emotional neglect. It was the deeper issue of how Cody treated each of them in the months leading up to Garrison's death and after. Meri, in particular, had been publicly struggling for years. We saw her on the show, fighting for any scrap of affection from Cody. And while she tried to put on a brave face, the cracks were visible. It wasn't just that Cody had pulled away. It was that he had actively replaced her. When she tried to reach out, when she sought reconciliation, he often turned his back. She became invisible in her own marriage, and the audience couldn't help but feel for her. Janelle, too, had been on the receiving end of Cody's favoritism. We saw how he started distancing himself from her, and how it affected their relationship. She tried to hold on to their family, but it felt like she was the last one holding the thread, trying to keep a broken tapestry from completely falling apart. And in the aftermath of Garrison's death, it wasn't lost on anyone that Janelle was the one who seemed most willing to hold her family together, but even her strength had limits. And Christine? Well, we all saw the shift in her. It became clear that Christine had been quietly carrying the weight of years of emotional neglect. Fans watched as she started to pull away, to take control of her own happiness. She wasn't just fighting for her place in Cody's heart anymore, she was fighting for herself. And the power shift became impossible to ignore. In fact, Christine's journey was perhaps the most emotionally charged for fans. She was the one who ultimately took the bold step of leaving. You saw it coming, didn't you? Slowly, over time, the weight of being in a marriage where she was constantly overlooked, emotionally dismissed, and ultimately unloved took its toll. Christine started finding her voice. She took a stand for her own mental health, for her own happiness, and for her kids. It wasn't just a marriage that ended. It was a declaration of self-worth. She wasn't going to sit in a marriage anymore where she was treated as second best. But this wasn't just about Christine's departure. No, it was about what her decision represented. Freedom. The ability to walk away from a toxic situation and reclaim your power. And when Christine made that choice, it was a pivotal moment for the entire family. She wasn't just leaving Cody. She was leaving a system that had never truly supported her. And that is what made her departure so powerful. It wasn't just about romantic love. It was about autonomy. But let's not forget the emotional toll this had on the kids, especially the ones who grew up in this family dynamic, watching their parents struggle under the weight of favoritism. How did they feel? I can't even begin to imagine. You saw the kids, like Isabel, Truly, and the others, going through the motions, not sure where they stood. Their family was changing before their eyes, and they were powerless to stop it. This wasn't just a family falling apart, it was generations of emotions, legacies, and traditions unraveling. It's a lot for any child to bear. And let's not overlook the fans who, through all this, had been rooting for Cody and his family to somehow work things out. We all wanted them to succeed. We wanted to believe in the idea of a harmonious polygamous family. But as the years wore on, it became clear that the cracks weren't just cracks anymore. They were chasms. And those chasms weren't something a few heartfelt apologies or some family therapy could fix. Cody's actions, or lack of actions, had alienated the very people who once believed in him. It was like a slow-motion train wreck, and fans couldn't look away. The emotional impact of Garrison's death didn't just affect the family. It shook the very foundation of everything they stood for. And in that moment of grief, it wasn't just Cody who was exposed. It was the whole dynamic of the Brown family. A dynamic that was once a symbol of love and unity was now reduced to a painful reminder of what happens when favoritism and neglect destroy even the deepest bonds. After the dust had settled, after the emotional wreckage of Garrison's passing, and after all the drama that had swirled around Cody and the wives, something started to shift, something powerful, something inspiring. For all the pain, all the neglect, and all the suffering they had endured over the years, the ex-wives began to find their strength in the most unexpected ways. Let's start with Christine, shall we? Her departure from Cody wasn't just a break in a marriage, it was her declaration of freedom. For years, we saw Christine struggle under Cody's emotional neglect. We watched as she fought for attention, for love, for validation, only to be met with Cody's cold indifference. But something clicked after Garrison's death. Christine started looking at her life differently, and she made one of the most courageous decisions any woman could make. She chose herself. The decision wasn't just about walking away from Cody. It was about reclaiming her identity. It was about finding her voice again. Christine didn't just walk away from a toxic marriage. She walked into her own life, unburdened by the years of emotional suppression. And let's be real, her journey was nothing short of empowering. She started prioritizing her own happiness, and the more she focused on herself, the more radiant she became. Fans watched as Christine transformed before their very eyes. She wasn't just posting pictures of herself looking radiant and happy. She was showing the world that happiness was hers to claim. There was no more waiting for Cody's approval or hoping for crumbs of affection. She embraced her independence with an energy that was magnetic. And it was clear. Christine was becoming the woman she was always meant to be, free from the toxic web Cody had weaved around her. But Christine wasn't the only one finding her way. Meri, too, began her own journey of self-discovery, though hers was a little more complicated. Meri had been dealing with Cody's emotional neglect for years, but after Christine's departure, she too started realizing that she deserved more. It wasn't easy for her. There were many moments when it felt like she was still holding on to a ghost of a marriage that no longer existed. But even Meri, in her quiet and often painful journey, started looking inward. She started taking charge of her own life in ways we hadn't seen before. In a way, Meri's transformation wasn't just about her relationship with Cody, it was about her relationship with herself. For so long, she had put herself second. But as time went on, Meri began to break free from the patterns that had kept her tied to Cody's emotional abuse. She began to take steps to move forward, even if it was slowly. Meri's journey may not have been as bold and outwardly dramatic as Christine's, but it was no less important. In her own way, she was reclaiming her life. And then there's Janelle. Oh, Janelle, let me tell you, her transformation has been something else entirely. Janelle, who had always been the steady, strong presence in the family, began to realize her own worth. For years, she had put up with Cody's neglect, tried to be the peacekeeper, the one who held the family together. But after Garrison's death and everything that had come to light about Cody's favoritism, Janelle started standing up for herself in ways we hadn't seen before. Janelle's transformation wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. She took control of her health and well-being, shedding the weight of emotional neglect along with the physical. She became the embodiment of what it means to reclaim your power and your life. It wasn't about trying to get Cody's attention anymore. It was about Janelle taking the reins of her own destiny. Janelle, like Christine, learned that her happiness didn't depend on Cody, and even if it took some time, she started carving out a life for herself, a life that was hers and hers alone. No longer was she the woman who waited for scraps of affection. She was a woman who was enough on her own. And let's talk about the ex-wives together. There was a point when we all saw it, right? That moment of unity when they truly started supporting one another, even without Cody in the picture. It wasn't just that they were ex-wives, they were women who had been through the fire together. They had shared so much, endured so much. They knew each other's pain, their triumphs, and their struggles. And in the midst of all that pain, they began to rebuild. Not just as individuals, but as a community of women. It wasn't about Cody anymore. It was about them. They were reclaiming their own stories, their own voices, and their own futures. They didn't need him to validate them. They were validating themselves. And let's be honest, that's what made this whole journey so incredible to watch. These women, who once stood in the shadows of Cody's influence, were stepping into the light of their own lives. This wasn't just about the breakup of a polygamous family, it was about the healing of 3 women who had been emotionally suppressed for years. It was about their journey to independence and self-love. The emotional devastation they had endured didn't define them anymore. They were reclaiming their lives, rewriting their own narratives, and finding the strength they'd never known they had. And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful part of the story is that they didn't need Cody to complete them. They were complete all on their own. As fans, we witnessed this transformation with awe and respect. We saw the struggle, the heartbreak, and the eventual triumph. These women had endured emotional trauma, but they were no longer victims. They were survivors, warriors, and advocates for their own happiness. So, what's next for them? Who knows? But one thing is for sure, the Brown family, as it once was, is gone. But what's been left behind is a legacy of strength, resilience, and self-worth that can't be erased. It's a powerful message to every woman who's ever felt undervalued or unheard. You are enough. You don't need anyone's approval but your own. And maybe that's the most healing thing of all. These women didn't just walk away from Cody, they walked into themselves. And that's something no one can take away. So, now that we've seen the ex-wives step into their own strength and self-worth, there's still one last piece of this puzzle to talk about: the aftermath. The aftermath of everything Cody put them through. The emotional scars are real, even though they found their power, and that's something that no one can ignore. Cody's actions or lack of actions left deep marks. And those marks? They're not just going to disappear because Christine, Meri, and Janelle are reclaiming their lives. No, this isn't some fairy tale where everything magically gets better once the toxic relationship is severed. The emotional damage runs deep. These women, even as they thrive and become empowered, still carry the weight of the emotional neglect, the favoritism, and the betrayal they experienced. And honestly, that's one of the hardest truths to face, because we see them shine, right? We cheer for them. We love watching Christine embrace her independence, Meri finding her quiet strength, and Janelle flourishing in her own space. But we can't forget the price they paid for all of this. It's easy to get caught up in their new lives and their newfound confidence. But let's not forget the trauma it took to get here. Cody, he's still out there, still doing his thing, still making headlines with his new life and his constant attempts to justify his actions. And Cody? Well, he hasn't exactly been the picture of growth, has he? For all of the times he's talked about wanting to move forward and fix things, it seems like Cody is still very much stuck in his old ways. His favoritism, his neglect, those things haven't just vanished. And it's clear that the damage he caused to the relationships with Meri, Janelle, and Christine isn't something he can just wish away. His actions have consequences, and no matter how much he tries to defend himself or paint a rosy picture, the truth remains, he hurt those women, and they're not going to forget it. There's something so raw about that, isn't there? The realization that even after everything, after all the apologies, all the promises to do better, sometimes the damage is done, and no amount of explanation can erase the hurt. No one wants to be the villain in their own story, but Cody's behavior left him as the one who betrayed the trust of the very people who had loved him. That betrayal? It's a tough thing to recover from. But what's fascinating here is the complexity of it all. Cody is still part of the equation. The kids, his children, are still caught in the middle of this fractured family. And while the ex-wives are moving on and flourishing, it's impossible to ignore the fact that this family is never going to be what it once was. The ties have been broken, trust has been shattered, and those kids, they'll never look at their father in quite the same way again. And that's one of the hardest truths to grapple with, too. Cody's relationship with his children has been strained by all of this. He can't just write it all off as if it didn't happen. The kids see it, they feel it, and they too are going to carry the consequences of his actions. His favoritism, his emotional neglect, those things didn't just affect his wives. They affected his whole family. The ripple effects of his choices will continue to shape his relationships for years to come. But back to the ex-wives. Let's take a moment to reflect on where they stand now. After everything, they're not just survivors. They're warriors. They've gone through the fire, come out on the other side, and emerged stronger than ever. The self-love they've developed isn't just a byproduct of leaving Cody, it's a hard-earned victory. They've rebuilt themselves from the inside out. And though the scars of their past will never fully disappear, those scars are now part of their strength. Each of these women is living proof that you can heal from betrayal. You can rebuild after years of emotional neglect. You can reclaim your identity, your happiness, and your life, even when you feel like you've been broken beyond repair. And maybe that's the most incredible part of their journeys. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. And let's not forget, this is their story. This is their triumph, not Cody's, not the narrative he tries to sell. This is the story of 3 women who chose to stop being silenced. 3 women who, despite all odds, found the strength to walk away from years of emotional abuse and take control of their own destinies. At the end of the day, Cody's choices have consequences, not just for him, but for everyone around him. And though he may continue to justify his actions, he can't change the fact that his favoritism, his lack of attention, and his emotional neglect led to the unraveling of his family. But the ex-wives? They've taken control of their own lives now. They're no longer waiting for Cody's approval. They've found their power, and they're not looking back. They're forging new paths, embracing new relationships, and building lives that are truly theirs. And that, my friends, is something to celebrate. As we look at where the Brown family stands now, it's clear that Cody and Robin, despite their attempts to paint a picture of unity, are left isolated in the end. Their so-called togetherness couldn't shield them from the consequences of Cody's actions. He might have Robin by his side, but the truth is, the rest of his world is crumbling. Fans, the very ones who once supported the Brown family, are now increasingly distancing themselves from Cody and Robin. Their relationship, though publicized, feels more like a consolation prize than a true victory. And as they continue to play out their narrative, it's hard not to notice how much of the attention has shifted to the ex-wives, especially Christine, Meri, and Janelle. The fans? They're done with the drama. They're rooting for these women to break free, to live their best lives on their own terms. And with the energy and excitement surrounding Christine's new life, the idea of an ex-wives spin-off is gaining more and more traction. Viewers are eager to see them thrive and reclaim their voices without the overshadowing presence of Cody. How do you feel about Cody and Robin's relationship now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to TLC's Sister Wives Reality for more updates.